Kevin Lips, thank you for joining me today here on Contractor Stories. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Jim. How about yourself?
I am living the dream. I'm excited about your company growth. We'll get into that because you guys are really on a great trajectory. You have a rebrand recently behind you. You work with your brothers. Um, it, it's an exciting time for your business, isn't it?
Big time. Yeah. Yeah. We feel like we've really set a foundation over the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Hmm.
And we're ready for it. We really went slow with our growth. And this is the first year where we made pretty big public to our company goals.
Yeah. So this is a family business started back in about 1986. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. Our dad, Ron, started in '86, and it's right into not commercial, residential new construction. And we still do work for a couple of the builders today.
Yeah. You made a big change when you came into the company though, didn't you? You really wanted to dive deep into residential, which is near and dear to my heart. I love residential for many reasons. Number one, the margins are higher. Number two, you're not dealing with professional buyers, and I won't get into that, but I think you know what I mean. You get paid right away. Are those kind of some of the big things you like about it?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, there's definitely some delays in payment from the bigger projects, and you're basically funding some people's projects, and it takes a while to collect. When we started getting the home service and getting into people's homes, you do collect very quickly, sometimes even right before we start the work, and always went right when we finish the work. So it's really filled a great gap to cover our basically our payroll weekly. It's been awesome from a home service standpoint.
Yeah, the cash flow is much better in my opinion. Um, the dollars are better top and bottom, they end up usually being better. And what I meant by you're not dealing with a professional buyer, with the homeowner, it's not a bad thing for them. They just aren't going to be beating you up day in, day out, month after month, year after year, because that's not what they do. This is a one-off thing, possibly, most likely. And they might get 3 bids, but that's it. It's not, "No, I know what you guys are making. I know what you can do, and the industry standard is this," and the homeowner doesn't know that. Just like when you walk into the grocery store or the Best Buy, if they say the printer is $199, go, "Oh, I know that you sourced that for 25."
Yeah,
So, it's a little bit different, right?
yeah, for sure, for sure. And I'd add to that too is there's no markup from the builder or the contractor as
Mhm.
well. So that helps our pricing to be more in line to what they would be paying if they did hire someone to help them.
Sure, because you're getting it's more of a retail price versus a wholesale price. And
Yes.
so you're in more of the retail business working with the end user versus a middleman who's gonna be ultimately selling to the end user. So you're the head honcho, you've got a couple brothers working with you. I'm sure they don't wanna hear that, but, who's in charge over there amongst the 3 of you?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO, and my older brother is our field guy. He knows the trade. He's we all grew up doing it. We all were in the band with dad, starting as early as 8th grade, and just learning how to do the trade. Ronnie never stopped, so
Mm.
he's got almost 30 years experience in the trade and is really good with customers. And he's our engine from making sure the customers are happy and the work's getting done. And he's now becoming really good at training our other technicians and teaching them that what's your most important tool? It's a drop cloth.
Mm.
Take care of the space, keep it clean. And it's really cool. And my younger brother Tommy is very, very hands-on from a business perspective, and he's taken on our sales manager role. And we have a process that we follow. And we had 2 sales technicians, and now we have a third. And now the onboarding of the third has been so smooth. He's already up and running. He's actually outperforming where we were. So our growth in terms of home service sales is tripled in 1 year since he's been here, and I would put that solely on his efforts.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Something else I wanna bring up about you, which is relatively unique, is that when you were young, you started out in the family business. you have an MBA and you worked in the corporate world and now you're back in. Do you feel that doing the formal education and being in the corporate world, which is also a formal education, is helpful to you today at this stage of your life and your business?
It's been critical for me as the person that I am, going through all the stuff in the different corporate jobs that I had. I was in procurement and sourcing and logistics, and I met with a lot of different vendors for those bigger companies, and did tours of their shops and tours of their facilities, and saw exactly how they laid out their offices and how their office staff worked with the manufacturing side or with their field service folks. And the exposure that I gained was invaluable, and it gave me confidence to know when I came back what works and what doesn't work. For me, it was critical.
I think it is a fantastic foundation. I've spoken to some home service professionals on this podcast who did it the other way around, where they did grow up in the family business, but then they were acquired by a bigger company that was more corporate. And now they had to go from the family business into the corporate structure because they weren't the family business anymore. They were absorbed. That can be very difficult. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. I could see why that would be tough to do. And in a way, I kind of did that
Mm.
because I do have more of a corporate experience. I got 16 years in corporate. So when I came in here bringing SOPs and manuals and processes and all these improvements and all this stuff on spreadsheets, um, to a three-man team. Now I was the fourth man.
Mm.
They're like, what is all this?
Yeah.
Like, it was confusing. And, I do love a spreadsheet, but I've learned how to communicate to my staff here without a spreadsheet, and then if we need to go into it, I can dive into the details. But I could totally see how that would be a tough transition, but it's something we all can learn.
You are probably very well positioned in the company because of your varied background, formal education, which doesn't do you a lot of good until you apply it, which you have in the corporate world. And now you're really in the real thick of it because you're in charge of this, versus working for a corporation in a department. You don't get a lot of breadth. You're often in one area: sales, marketing, accounting, whatever it is. You wear all the hats with your people, right?
That's 100% accurate. And the highs and lows are there. It is challenging. I've talked to other folks, and every single person that I've talked to in the different networks, we all have highs and lows. And but yeah, all the different hats are it's I kind of find that enjoyable. I like when my job changes and my role changes, and that. And um, I've had to learn how to delegate and take off a hat and give it away and then
Mhm.
fail and then hire someone else and give the hat away after making improvements, then fail, but we keep learning. And I think that's one of the most critical things that I've learned since I've come back here is failure is okay. Just try to do it fast.
Yeah,
Um,
feel that.
and learn from it though. Like each time that we've hired like we had challenges finding a good CSR.
Mm.
And, end of the day, I just think we mostly had challenges with our expectations of what a CSR should be doing. And once we fully define that and now have operating manuals to use as well, it makes the onboarding and expectations that much easier. And I didn't know that right away. I've learned it from resources and networking and different groups I'm part of.
We like to blame the people at the bottom who mess up. We can't. It really starts at the top. You could almost never, ever, ever blame the person at the bottom. You can remove the person because they're a bad apple, but if your CSR department, let's say you've got 5 CSRs, is failing, it's not them most likely. Even if it is them, you're the one who hired them, so it's still your fault. And so what I like to do in business or anything in my life is start the projects, go down a path and then refine until it's perfect. Education for you did not stop after getting your MBA. I understand that you know Al Levy. Let's hear about that.
Yeah. So I joined the Home Service Freedom Group that Tommy Mello runs
Mhm.
a few years ago in Orlando. 2023 is the first trip. And honestly, that trip is how I got my younger brother to join the company. He finally saw the light and the potential for what we're able to do. And the first thing I did when I even actually while we were still down in Orlando is I bought into Al Levy's program, and which is the operating manuals. And within a month, I had all the manuals for a technician, for a CSR, and a DSR done, and we started to implement those right away. That became our foundation, and it helped us honestly when it went through it. There was 15 or 20 things in every manual that we didn't have. So we're like, okay, well, how do we fill the gaps? So it basically illustrated to us like these are the things we need to solve. And some of them were don't do it, but others were, well, this is how we do it. Can we tweak it? And those have become our foundation, and tie that to the other portion of the program, which is really heavy on the org charts, organizational charts, and box
Mhm.
charts. And the amount of times that I bring up an org chart is probably annoys people,
Yeah.
but it's the most important thing from my perspective. And just Friday, we changed it again. So I finally was able to not hire. I have a couple really good senior electricians that are so good at the trade, really good with bringing on juniors and apprentices, and using them in the field to do the work. And we have not had a true field supervisor person yet. Well, now we have two, and we promoted them. They're both excited for it, and now we're going to be able to really beef those teams up with more folks to do more work. And obviously, you can't do all that without the sales part. So we've been beefing that up too. Like I think I mentioned that earlier, that our sales technicians, our growth there, and our average tickets are improving.
I don't know about you, but I have been criticized over the years by my team members in a kind way. "Jim, you keep changing. You say you're gonna do this, and then we retreat and do that. And then we're gonna do that, and then we retreat and do this." I think if you're entrepreneurial and you're growing a business, you have to do that, don't you?
I think you do, but you have to balance it.
Mm,
And I think you can also acknowledge all these things that are great ideas as an entrepreneurial. And I have more than most people in the company. But then I have to shut my mouth and choose the right time to bring those in. What another Al Levy thing, home service freedom thing, is with I forget exactly what it's called, but you have your top 100 projects, dial that into your top 30 projects, and then dial that into top 5 projects. And you publish and preach to the team, we're working on these 5 projects. And when the ideas come up that aren't part of those, the question is what do you do with them? And then we have to decide as a leadership team, do we need to move one back?
yeah.
Or is this fast enough it can be treated like a side project? Or this goes in the top 30, and when we finish one of the top 5, we pull from there, and it just changes the so I would say it comes down to prioritizing.
Mhm.
And we've implemented the top 5 thing probably 9 months ago, and have completed some really important portions of those. And some of them we didn't even really come into play until the last month or two, which I mentioned a little bit about career path and skill sets. And when we come in as an apprentice, and what should you know? Well, now we have a red, yellow, green on what does that technician know. And then you have juniors, and you have seniors in field service. And we built that 6 months ago, and finally, in the last 2 months, we implemented them in our quarterly meetings with our technicians, and say, we had them fill them out. Where
Mhm.
do you think you are? And then their managers worked with them to get the colors right. And now we have a very clear expectation of, and we put pay levels too. Like at a apprentice, this is your pay range. At a junior, this is your pay range, and some overlap. But when you see a red, it's we have to fix that, and if you see a yellow, well, you can't really get promoted until you make that green.
Mhm.
And it's becoming a real good way for my team. Even this morning, we're negotiating with one of the leads, and we're just trying to figure out what's the best way to move forward. And one of my lead managers came back and said, or my leadership team members came back and said, we'll just use the 9 box chart and we're going to red, yellow, green. And part of it is we'll give half now, but make these green, and then we'll give you the other portion to which, and wonderful. Great. If those boxes are green, then he's going to be more profitable to the company. So we have more money to pay,
It's
so yeah,
relatively simple. And
complex too,
yes,
but yes,
having
simple.
systems, SOPs, ways to measure are so important. Well, you were in Orlando at Tommy Mello's Home Service Freedom event. Is that when you met Dan Antonelli? Because I see you have a rebrand, and that's got Dan Antonelli and Kick Charge written all
Big
over.
time. Big time. We got our little Lips character.
Yeah.
We haven't named him yet, but it sounds like it's going to be Lippy or Lipper. I don't.
I was gonna say Lippy. I
Yeah,
mean, you have to
yeah,
have a Y like a Tommy, a Jimmy, a Lippy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's a 5-year-old kid that lives next door to us. We have young kids, and he was over in our yard, and he's like, "What is that? Who is that?" And I was like, "Well, he don't have a name. What should it be?" And he said Lippy. So maybe it's a thing. I don't know.
I vote for Lippy. So tell
Yeah,
me
but I
about
do.
tell me
I know
about the
the.
journey. How did you get from your existing brand to the new brand?
Yeah, fair enough. And it was kind of I had my cousin, shout out to Allie. She designed our original logo, and we loved it. Like it was cool as an L and an E for Lips Electric, and but it looked cool, and the bands looked sharp to us. We really liked it, and did not know Dan Antonelli until after that Orlando trip. And then I have met him a couple times in passing at other events because we still participate in the Home Service Freedom Group. But his team was great to work with. I'll tell you what, this was hard to do. You can imagine with our last name, what we heard as kids, and even in high school, it probably got worse. All the different ways to say our name, and it was tough. But they were really great to work with, and they gave us different mascots to look at too and consider. And we decided, and they convinced us too to lean into the name, and
I
then so we did, and it was really fun. And so now we have 4 vans of the 11 wrapped, and I cannot wait to do them all. Just the growth part and where do you spend your cash is kind of been the hesitant thing, but
Mhm.
it's exciting. Yeah, it's really cool. And when you see our vans driving um, down the street, it's cool, and people do comment on them. Even when they call in for work, they see our vans. We do not have a phone number on the van. The name, and not just the name, this character is catchy and people see it.
Dan talks about being 5 mile famous. Um, Branding can be a big part of that. You don't necessarily need to have anything on your vehicles other than a catchy name, because if people are going online and they
Mhm.
type in lips, electric, or electrical, or I need my electrical fix from Lips, you're going to show up at the top if everything is done correctly. Google's going to index it properly, and boom, you're done. So, Dan talks a lot about saving a whole lot of money on marketing and advertising by properly branding. Do you believe in that philosophy?
I do, and that's why we invested in it. I would probably be saying I'm jumping the gun and saying we've seen a ton of that right now, but we're making efforts to do that.
Mhm.
Now, people do recognize the van and it's cute and all that, but that's not really why we do it, right? We do it to be able to get people to call us so we can pay less on marketing,
Yeah.
and or at least direct them to us through the marketing, and makes those channels work better. We never advertised until January of last year. Like we didn't do anything,
Really?
nothing. And our first stab was with Camp Digital, and they're through Home Service Freedom Group. They're one of
Mhm.
the vendors in there, and they've been great. Like our LSAs went from like the first month in January was like 7, then the next month it was like 21, and then the next month it was 50, and then it was like 100. So now we're getting like 150 to 200 LSA um, calls per month, and then we do invest a little bit in pay per click when we slow down. But now we're starting to do branded searches and investing in that front, and it's new. So I fully anticipate it to make a big difference on the marketing costs. But what I like about it the most so far has been the team. My team actually really likes it, and they love these shirts. Like we still have the basic blue one with with this guy and the logo. But since we got the colorful ones, they're always wearing those over the other ones. And I feel like, and we have the decor around the building, not fully, but enough where when you walk in, you see it all,
Mhm.
and I really think it helps us with our culture.
It always does. It unites the team generally. It makes them feel that they're part of a unified brand. It elevates the company. It internally and externally, let's talk internally quickly here about your team members. They should have, most of them should have felt, we're going in the right direction and I feel I'm part of a brand instead of I just work for the company that does electrical work, which is fine. But it becomes kind of a family oriented thing. Does that make sense?
I totally agree. Yes, yeah, and I used to work for a big company named Chiquita, and that brand, man, I drove in the opening day parade for the Chiquita float. I
Yep.
drove the float, and the amount of people that saw the Chiquita Banana Lady went nuts for the brand.
Mm.
Was very eye opening to me. The power of a brand, and I'm excited for us to actually have one, And at first, when you showed me this little character, I was like, "There's no way," and now I'm like, I freaking love it.
Yeah. No, it's it's important to have brands. So you're a multi-talented guy. What is your number one superpower?
Oh man, I feel like I'm pretty good at the chess game related to like the different moves and the pieces, and I'm pretty good at listening.
Mm,
So when my leaders, I fully trust my leaders and their opinions, and I might give them feedback that why I think something's not exactly aligned or I don't agree with them on it. I don't have any problem having that conversation. But one of the things I always do is I can hear all their sides, and I've already, of course, have thought through a lot of the things too. And I can make a decision and run with it. And generally, it's not just run with it. I get buy-in from them, an agreement. And then once we all agree, then all of a sudden it's happening. So I feel like that has been my biggest strength. And I didn't even know I had that superpower until really the last year, where I started getting so much more focused on learning how to delegate and delegate appropriately, reading books on it, and hearing speakers talk about it. And that I think learn and continuous learning. And I think that's
yeah.
part of listening. But I would say that would be where I do the best.
Yeah, they say leaders are readers. I know you're a reader because I kinda looked over your shoulder and I saw some books. Let's talk a little bit about books. How many books do you think you read a year?
It kind of has varied. I could read up to 30, 40 books, and then I need to back off because part of reading to me is recalling.
Yeah,
Like if I power through something, my retention is not where it needs to be. So I've dialed back the last 6 months, and I do like to. Well, I don't really want to go down the golf path, but I got an analogy with golfing. But it's the same thing with anything you're learning from coaching, in my perspective. And I've really gone down the let's learn everything we can from Tommy Mello's team from Home
mhm,
Service Freedom and take advantage of all the things that they offer in that program. And then Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time is the other
yep.
one. And going all in on that. And I have a couple little social media groups that I'm really trying to dial into, which is a feed off of the Dan Martell part. So this year, I'm going to try not to bring extra noise, and I'm going to really double down on those two books. But I don't know. I still will likely read one book a month. Is typical for me.
Yeah, it's about right for me as well. Let's talk about buying back your time. That's a big thing with Tommy Mello. And when people are scaling a company such as you are, it's probably very necessary to implement a system like that. What have you learned from Dan's book and system and the way he lives his life, um, outside of being in prison, by the way,
Yeah,
which is part of his story,
it is.
um, which helps make everyone's story, I guess, when you go through tough times. But what resonates and how have you implemented?
Well, I think the easiest place to start is the beginning of his replacement ladder.
Mhm.
And that's with the very first rung is stop doing the administrative stuff. So stop being the one that responds to all my emails. Stop being the ones to fully manage my calendar. So I have an executive assistant who we're in Ohio. She's in Colorado. And she's been working with me for about 3 years. And and it's awesome because like I don't want to say she's like a copycat of me. And my role always changes, so her role always changes.
Yeah.
It's just she's usually taking on the stuff that I'm trying to stop doing, and I teach her, and we work together to create a process. And once that process is created, then when we have a new hire, we're able to pass it off on to other folks, and then she takes on the next realm. So now she's helping me with social media posts, and now I had issues with a bookkeeping company I was using, so now she's helping me with transactions for bookkeeping. And it's like she becomes my backup when I can't get to all of it. So
Mhm.
it allows me to say, okay, that's a $10 task, that's a $20 task. I shouldn't be doing that long term. If I need to figure out how to solve it from a system standpoint, I get involved. But once her and I figure that out, she takes it, and then we figure out, well, now what's her day look like? What's her hour by hour day, and what can we take off her plate and shift around? That's been the biggest area of focus, and it's teaching and doing the delegating part of it as well. And I did join part of Dan's elite program
Mhm.
that he does weekly calls on, and every time I sit on those, it's inspirational too. It's not just
Yeah.
having the abilities; it's having the mindset to go after it and do it. And kind of honestly, from your marketing to me to do this call with you,
Mhm.
it was a factor of Dan Martell saying, "Do the podcast,
Yeah.
reach out, have outreach, talk to people." And I'm still in the process of getting into a really good rhythm of reaching out to people on social media. And I think a big part of that is I'm trying to establish who I need to be to the market. So I'm kind of, Jim, just using this as a sounding board to get my voice out there, and really start to get out there into the social media world and use it for recruiting, use it for customers to get familiar with our brand, and going down that list.
It is smart. As you know, that's pretty much what I primarily do for a living is help, especially home service companies and personal brands within it get their name out to the community. And I welcome everyone since Kevin's kind of opened the door. Welcome anybody who has a small business who is watching or listening to this to contact me so you can tell your story. I spoke to a guy recently who said that he has a goal of being on 5 podcasts a month or something. That's a goal he has. I was contacted twice this week already to be on other people's podcasts, and that happens because I interview people and then they turn the tables, or I do so much of this, they see me out there in the digital space and they say, "Hey, this guy has something that I think would be interesting to my audience." And I think everybody should be out there doing podcasts, both audio and video. We made a decision a while ago. Actually, Tommy Mello pushed us into it. True story. We were doing his, and we still do his podcast for residential, his A1 Garage Door podcast. And we started off with an audio version. And I get this call from Tommy one day. "Jim," "Yeah, Tommy, we're going video." I said, "What do you mean we're going video?" He said, "The podcast is going video." I said, "Well, I produce the podcast and I'm not a video guy. I've got a face for radio. I've been doing radio for decades." And he says, "Jim, you didn't hear me. We're going video." So he actually pushed me and my business into video, A1 Garage Door Service was the first video podcast we did, and now all of our clients are doing that. And what's interesting is when you say podcast, a lot of people think audio only. Podcast meaning a digital version of a radio show, but it's come much further now, and I suggest people do get comfortable on the camera. I understand this is your first video podcast you've done,
It is, yes.
and
Yep.
you're doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I found it more enjoyable than I would. I was pretty nervous. I had to do the power pose before we got on the phone, Jim. You had me nervous, but nah,
It's
kind
not.
of teasing.
It's so I can see how it can be intimidating. I do this all day long, and honestly, not to shock everybody, but I've been talking to a microphone like this for 40 years. I started when I was 18 years old on the radio, and so the shift wasn't a big shift, but there's a huge difference. It's let's say audio is a one-dimensional. When you start doing camera, lights, action, right? With lights and having the good audio with the good video and looking into the camera. I mean, I have to force myself, as we all should, to probably look into the camera and not necessarily off camera, or if the person you're looking at is down here or over here, not looking at them here, right? And there's a lot of tricks, but you have a good point. Getting out there and talking to your community is so important today. Anybody in any business should be doing that. Let's talk a little bit about regrets. If you have any regrets, what's your biggest?
Oh man, like in life or business or
Anything you want, because often your personal life and business life are the same life. I mean, if you have a family, they are involved like you were starting in 8th grade, right? You were involved in the business. So I think it's one for business owners like you and I.
yeah, no, that's fair. I've obviously have made some stupid choices.
Mm.
Who hasn't, right? You know, I don't know, like, because I tend to be the person that's always going to say I learned from it. Like if there's some embarrassing things I did when I was a kid, I probably would like to not have done those.
Mhm.
But I'm really happy that cameras weren't around like they were today. You
Mhm.
know, but I would say it's kind of hard because I've always wanted to be in charge of this company ever since I first worked with my dad. And he told me when I was telling him, Dad, I want to work with you. I don't want to go to college. And he said, You're not working with me. You're going to college. And I said, Okay.
Mm.
And I did, and I ended up going, and it took me 16 years to come back. And I do feel like I wish I would have come back sooner.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the impact it would be to my family, and most of that time I met my wife 13 years ago. Um, I don't regret like any specific moment, but I would say it would be inaction. I do feel like I had plenty of times in my life where I could have jumped faster, or not even if I went here. Like I got comfortable in my different roles. So, I was at one company for 8 years and another one for 8 years, and I was probably done with them at year 4. And
Yep.
I would say it would be that. And I'm not saying that like I think this role I'm done in 4 years because I'm now at 8 years and that's my normal rhythm as I jump, right? But this one's so much more interesting to me because of the impact in the team. Now we got a 20-member team, and the success of this company drives their success as people. So I completely flipped it to not really give you a direct answer, but I would say it would be slow to move on things. And that's one of my biggest things now is move fast, but move fast on the top 5 chart. Don't force everything on all the people so they got to deal with my constantly
Absolutely.
changing.
Kevin, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today on Contractor Stories.
Thanks, Jim.
I'd love to have you back to further the stories and, maybe finish because we could go on and on. Can I have you back on the show sometime?
I would love to. Yeah, I really would. I enjoyed it. Thank
All
you.
right. On that note, thank you so much for joining me, my friend.
Thanks, Jim.